Good morning, everyone. I think we can go for pretty much an on-time start this morning. Thank you all for coming. My name is Wes Ingram. I oversee the branch at the Air Resources Board that prepared the short-lived climate pollutant plan. To my right is Ryan McCarthy, who's the Science and Technology Advisor to the Chairman of the ARB. To my left is Josh Kim, who worked closely with me on the SLCP report. And to my far left is Glenn Gallagher from our research division, who specializes in hydrofluorocarbons. So we very much appreciate your turning out today to join us, to offer your thoughts and help us to shape a good short-lived climate pollutant plan. We posted, as you probably know, the latest draft on November 26th, posted it for comment, and we plan to take it to the board in March for approval by our board. Between then and now, we'll be accepting comments both in forums like this and in written comments. So anybody can go to our website at any time and submit a written comment. So we'll revise our report as necessary and take it to the board in March. So this document was prepared in response to a couple of legislative mandates, both of which recognized the serious threat that is posed by short-lived climate pollutants, methane, black carbon, and hydrofluorocarbons. They don't hang around for very long, but do a lot of damage during their short lives. So one of the things that I wanted to emphasize is that our strategy document basically lays out the broad outlines of some measures that could be effective in reducing short-lived climate pollutant emissions. As such, it's a planning document. It doesn't contain a proposed regulation. It doesn't even contain any detailed regulatory proposals. All that's going to be worked out in the coming months and years in close collaboration with the public, with stakeholders, and our sister agencies in the state. So I just want to make sure that we understand what the purpose of the short-lived climate pollutant plan is. So I want to thank you again for joining us. Josh Kim will be summarizing the plan for us. And then following that, we'll invite you to come up and share your thoughts with us. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Josh for the presentation.
Thank you, Wes. As you can see in the first slide of our presentation, this workshop here in Diamond Bar is the second of 3 workshops that we have been conducting this week. The first one was in Fresno earlier this week on Monday, and tomorrow will be the third and last workshop that we'll be holding in Sacramento at the Cal EPA building.
You want me to do that? It's up to you.
No, it's okay. So today we're going to discuss the most significant changes that have been made in this version of the SLCP strategy. And I'm sorry if I don't clearly spell out some of the acronyms. I'll try my best to remember, but we usually shorthand short-lived climate pollutants as SLCP. So if you hear me say that, that's what I mean by SLCP. So we're going to discuss the most recent revisions that were made for the SLCP strategy that was originally released in April. And then to conclude the presentation, we'll be discussing the next steps that ARB and the staff here will be, the next steps that we'll be taking for to conclude our preparation for the strategy. So Senate Bill 605, which was signed in 2014, required the Air Resources Board, in consultation with other agencies, to develop a strategy to reduce SLCP emissions in California. We released several drafts of the strategy for public comment. A concept paper was released earlier in May 2015. The draft strategy was released in September 2015, and a proposed strategy was released earlier this year in April 2016. Since then, Senate Bill 1383 was signed in September, necessitating modifications to the strategy. Modifications were also made in response to public comments provided. And A draft environmental analysis was also revised to address changes made to the strategy. Both the revised proposed strategy and the revised draft environmental analysis was released for public comment in November of this year. Actually, before I continue, I'm sorry, I forgot to make mention that this presentation, this workshop is being webcasted. So for those of you who are online viewing this, in our webcast, we have an email address available for you to provide comments or questions. And at the conclusion of this presentation, we'll be accepting both in-person comments and questions as well as the emailed comments and questions to our webcast email address, which is listed in the video right now. It's slcp@arb.ca.gov. Senate Bill 1383 directs ARB and other agencies to do several things. First, it requires ARB to approve and begin implementing the SLCP strategy by January 1st, 2018. It codifies the 2030 SLCP emission reduction targets from earlier versions of the strategy, 40% reduction from 2013 levels by 2030 for methane, 40% reduction from 2013 levels by 2030 for HFCs or refrigerants, hydrofluorocarbons, and a 50% reduction of 2013 levels by 2030 for black carbon. It focuses on anthropogenic sources of black carbon. It provides specific direction on the development of methane reductions from dairy and livestock operations and landfills through diversion of organic materials. And it encourages state policies for production and use of RNG, or renewable natural gas. So on this slide, we provided a table that's included in the current and previous SLCP strategy documents. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's included in multiple parts of the strategy, and these are the emission reduction targets and the equivalent million metric tons carbon equivalent, CO2 equivalent levels. And as I mentioned before, they're the same table. It's the same table that's provided in the strategy that's available for download at our website. So by 2030, residential burning will be a significant source of California's anthropogenic black carbon inventory. The strategy focuses on incentive programs to replace wood-burning stoves as it has in earlier versions of the strategy. $5 million of cap-and-trade proceeds have been allocated in the 2016 and 2017 budget for wood stove replacement, which ARB will administer. Additionally, some air districts have existing incentive programs for wood stove changeouts, and we also envision that statewide efforts will include education and outreach, which could provide additional emission reductions from this source. ARB will continue to evaluate additional funding programs and other mechanisms to facilitate the number of wood stove changeouts necessary to reach the 2030 emission reduction target. And as before, we expect other planning activities underway, such as the state implementation plans to reduce black carbon from other sources in the state. The strategy no longer proposes forest measures consistent with Senate Bill 1383's focus on anthropogenic black carbon. We received a number of comments on the forest measures in the April version of this report. They highlighted differing opinions on the climate impact of forest management practices. We will continue to follow the research of the net carbon effect of various forest management practices. In addition, climate change and mitigation activities in the natural land sector will be further evaluated in other planning efforts, such as the Forest Carbon Plan. There are more legislative directives for the dairy and livestock sector than for any other sector, and consequently, there are several changes to the sector in the strategy in response to Senate Bill 1383. The strategy stresses a combination of near-term actions to reduce manure methane from this source through incentives, research, collaboration to overcome barriers, development of policies to encourage renewable natural gas production and other market support. The focus in the sector will be to develop as many methane reduction projects as possible at California dairies before any regulatory action is taken. ARB, the California Department of Food and Agriculture, and other relevant agencies, along with the dairy industry and stakeholders, will form dairy work groups next year in 2017 to identify and address barriers to development of dairy methane emission reduction projects. Also, the 2016-2017 budget includes $50 million in cap and trade proceeds to reduce manure methane from the dairy and livestock sector. And the California Department of Food and Agriculture will administer this program. So this law requires several other actions to address emission reductions from the dairy and livestock sector. It requires the Air Resources Board and the California Department of Food and Agriculture by July 2020 to evaluate the progress the dairy and livestock sector has made to meet the methane reduction goals for the sector. And based on this information, state agencies may make adjustments to the goals. It requires ARB in partnership with CDFA to develop a regulation to reduce manure methane emissions from the dairy and livestock sector for implementation on or after January 1st, 2024. We expect this rulemaking process to include extensive stakeholder engagement. Reporting and record-keeping requirements can be put in effect earlier than the 2024 date to help us gain a better understanding of the sources of greenhouse gas emissions from the dairy and livestock sector. And we will work with other agencies and industry groups to avoid any duplicate reporting requirements whenever possible. Senate Bill 1383 also requires ARB to post to its website a progress report before any regulation is adopted. The progress report must discuss the technological and economic feasibility of an emission reduction regulation, cost effectiveness, potential to minimize and mitigate leakage, and an evaluation of incentive-based programs. Senate Bill 1383 also requires a number of actions by January 1st, 2018 to support dairy methane reduction projects in the state. The Air Resources Board, in consultation with the California Energy Commission and the California Public Utilities Commission, must establish energy infrastructure development and procurement policies to support dairy biomethane projects. The California Public Utilities Commission, in consultation with the Air Resources Board and the California Department of Food and Agriculture, must direct utilities to develop at least 5 dairy biomethane projects to demonstrate the feasibility of pipeline injection. ARB must develop a pilot financial mechanism to reduce the economic uncertainty associated with environmental credits, such as the low carbon fuel standard credits for dairy-related projects. ARB must also provide guidance on the impact of potential regulations on revenue streams from the low carbon fuel standards credits and cap and trade compliant offsets. And all of these actions will help us overcome the barriers that are making it difficult to get these projects up and running. Senate Bill 1383 requires that only voluntary incentive-based approaches be used to reduce enteric fermentation emissions until cost-effective and scientifically proven reduction methods are available. Any regulatory actions on enteric emissions must not compromise animal health, public health, or consumer acceptance of dairy products. Federal and state agencies will collaborate with academia and the dairy industry on research projects on and demonstration projects for enteric emission reduction methods. So moving forward to the landfill sector. For landfill emission reduction measures, Per Senate Bill 1383, the strategy, the SLCP strategy, now directs CalRecycle in partnership with the Air Resources Board to develop regulations to reduce landfill emissions by diverting organics from the waste stream. In previous versions of the strategy, ARB was to develop the regulation. CalRecycle will develop the regulations by 2018, and by 2020, organic waste entering landfills must be reduced by 50% from 2014 levels, and by 2025 by 75% using 2014 levels. Additionally, by 2025, 20% of edible foods destined for the organic waste stream must be redirected to feed people in need. This could include education regarding food preparation and storage, refining food purchasing practices, and food banks and community kitchens. Senate Bill 1383 specifies that the regulations must be implemented on or after January 1st, 2022. So before the regulations are implemented, CalRecycle and ARB must conduct an analysis of the progress the state and local government and waste sector have made in achieving the organic waste reduction goals for 2020 and 2025. Sorry about that. The analysis must include the status of new organic recycling infrastructure development, including the commitment of state funding and appropriate rate increases for solid waste and recycling services to support infrastructure expansion. The progress in reducing regulatory barriers to the siting of organics recycling facilities, effectiveness of policies that will facilitate the permitting of organics recycling infrastructure, the status of market for the products generated by organics recycling facilities, including cost-effective electrical interconnection and common carrier pipeline injection of digester biomethane, and status of markets for compost, biomethane, and other products from recycling of organic waste. And the analysis may result in changes to requirements and/or incentives in the regulation. Senate Bill 1383 includes provisions to urge ARB and other agencies to develop sources and markets for renewable gas that will help us put methane generated from the waste stream to beneficial use. The California Energy Commission, in consultation with the California Public Utilities Commission and the Air Resources Board, will develop recommendations for the development and use of renewable gas as part of the 2017 Integrated Energy Policy Report, or IPER. Based on these recommendations, the California Public Utilities Commission, in consultation with the California Energy Commission and the Air Resources Board, will develop additional policies to support development and use of in-state renewable gas. Concerning the HFC, or refrigerant measures, the strategy acknowledges the global phase-down of HFC production agreed upon at the October 2016 Montreal Protocol meeting of the parties in Kigali, Rwanda. The Air Resources Board will assess the impact of the international agreement on projected California HFC emission reductions in early 2017. And based on this evaluation, the Air Resources Board may make adjustments to the proposed HFC measures included in the strategy that are on this slide in order to meet the 40% reduction goal. So some economic analysis revisions were also included in the SLCP strategy. Some changes were made and in response to the public comments and also to Senate Bill 1383. So organic diversion targets in Senate Bill 1383 are actually lower than what was in the previous strategy, meaning fewer facilities are needed to handle the diverted organic waste, and overall costs are going to be lower. The dairy economic analysis was primarily updated in response to public comments. New scenarios, including covered lagoon digesters, which are standard in California. These were not previously analyzed. and the new scenarios increase the coverage of potential methane mitigation pathways, but are not meant to be an exhaustive list. New sector-wide analyses incorporated a dairy-by-dairy economic analysis to better account for the effect of dairy size on cost. The analysis also considered individual dairy characteristics that affect costs, such as the distance to pipeline, to a common pipeline, or distance to truck manure in a centralized location. Selected costs were updated in response to public comments, and an example of this is interconnection and manure trucking costs. So it's included as an appendix to the strategy, but a revised environmental analysis was also developed and completed for the strategy. The environmental analysis provides a pragmatic level analysis of the potential for environmental impacts associated with implementation of the measures recommended in the strategy. So the environmental analysis found implementation of the measures could result in some potentially significant environmental impacts. The identified impacts are primarily short-term construction-related impacts associated with reasonably foreseeable actions carried out in response to implementation of measures. An example of this is obviously the construction of digesters. So it's expected many of the identified impacts could and should be mitigated when these construction projects are carried out, either approved or permitted at the local level. As the Air Resources Board develops the measures in the strategy, staff will work with other state and local agencies to design ARB's programs and regulations in ways that avoid environmental trade-offs and maximize potential environmental benefits to the degree feasible. And the revised draft environmental analysis was actually released for public comment in November, in line with the strategy, and the comment period began with its release in November and will end on January 17th at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The staff will prepare written responses to written comments received on the draft EA, and actually in the slides later we'll be providing the location for where comments can be provided online on the ARB website. And I just want to reiterate the comment period deadline is January 17th. So finally, to conclude our presentation, the comment period, again, ends for both the proposed strategy and revised draft EA on January 17th. Staff will present the final SLCP strategy, written responses to comments received on the draft, the revised draft environmental analysis, and the final environmental analysis for board certification will be in March 2017. The final SLCP strategy will be integrated into the upcoming 2030 Target Scoping Plan update. So this is the link that we're going to provide to send in comments for both the SLCP strategy and the revised draft environmental analysis. And if anyone needs additional information regarding our short-lived climate pollutant plan, you can find it here on the SLCP main webpage. If need be, you can also search on Google. I've done this before. If you just type in ARB SLCP, this SLCP webpage should be one of the first, if not the first, entry on Google or any other search engine that you use. And we're also providing some context if any specific questions anyone has. Our branch chief here, Wes, his contact information is there. Our section manager, Dave Mell, and our lead staff on this SLCP report, Marcel Surovic. And I think that concludes our presentation.
Okay, this is the part in the program where we invite you to come forward, and I believe those who would like to provide comments or ask questions can use either of these two podiums in the front. So whenever you're ready, please come forward and share your thoughts. Your thoughts are very important. We develop our policies in a very public setting, so take advantage of the opportunity.
Good morning, Frank Capone, LA County Sanitation Districts. We're still gathering our comments and trying to get things together, but let me give you a spattering of issues that we're going to be commenting on. First, the forest sector. As you know, the forest sector is a huge component of the short-lived climate pollutants. We think it should be included and addressed in a very large way. It's only fair that that component of it, especially given the size of that, be part of the strategy. The 2020 report that's required under 1383, which is going to look at barriers as well as other obstacles in trying to implement things like organic diversion. It's a very, very important report. It's so important that we believe that you should go beyond 1383, and that report should really start next year. It should be a living document that you should be working on continuously. Given the real challenges of getting to the 2020 and the 2025 organic diversion goals, quite frankly, I think 2020 is just too late to really start developing or finalizing this report. You really need to look at this stuff as early as you could possibly can. And like I said, I really believe it should be a living document that you should work on continuously and keep tackling the problems as they arise. That's the only way we're going to get to 2020 and 2025 in a realistic way. Speaking of that, wastewater treatment plants, as you acknowledge in the report, is a big component of the organic diversion equation and its ability to accept food waste in excess capacity at the digesters. So we fully support that and encourage you to keep supporting it, and it has to be supported in terms of dollars too. You know, it's a universal comment, and I'm sure other people make it in their own venues, but without the proper incentives, we're just not going to get there. And wastewater treatment really serves as a very short-term bridge to get to those goals, because we could do it quickly, but we need incentives to get there. I was just talking to Ryan because there's some mention of it in this plan, but also in the scoping plan about possible ways to fund this through tipping fees or generation fees. The numbers just don't pencil out in terms of the dollars we really need to build infrastructure to get to the organic diversion goals that we need. There has to be incentives, and we believe it should be cap and trade money. And we know there's problems in moving forward with the cap and trade program, which will be addressed probably in 2017. But it has to happen. We have to have that to get there, or else there's just not going to be enough money to make this happen. I can't stress that enough. Kind of a nitpicky issue, but one that the wastewater community is we make the comment every time, and it just never seems to get fixed. It's portrayed in these documents that wastewater treatment has a large percentage of methane emissions. It's a mischaracterization of the sector. We've had this discussion with the inventory folks. They understand it, and they actually have, because where the methane comes from in wastewater treatment processes is not wastewater treatment. It's an aerobic process, so there is no methane that comes out of a municipal wastewater treatment plant. Where the methane is coming from that gets into the air is from septic systems. And that really should be separated out. And it's separated out for a couple of reasons. One is simply a mischaracterization, because people that don't understand that think it's our industry that's putting that out, and it's not. But secondly, if you want to really address the issue of methane from septic systems, you got to call it out separately so people understand the issue. So I just encourage you, and we'll put it in writing again, please call that out separately. It really would be fair to our industry, but also, I think, constructive for ARB if they want to tackle that methane emissions. Renewable natural gas, and we commented very heavily in the scoping plan comments, which are due tomorrow. We fully support a renewable natural gas standard. It's part of the equation of making organic diversion happen. We have to have a market for renewable natural gas. The scoping plan talks about a 5% RNG standard. We fully support that, but unfortunately, it only talks about it in terms of alternative one scenario. We think it should be in every scenario. So once again, we fully support that, and we think it should be broad. You should be looking at 5% across the board in every scenario you look at. And that's fully supported by mine industry, the landfill industry, as well as the gas companies fully support that too. Cost analysis, we're working on that. We'll have some comments on that. Just a quick note on the environmental assessment you had mentioned. You concluded that your only really significant impact is construction. Just in thinking off the top of my head, as you said that, the other things you really need to look at, as we're building more digesters, as we're building more compost facilities, there's going to be a significant issue with nuisance. These facilities are odorous, and I could tell you will have problems with nuisance, and so that has to be part of the environmental assessment. Trucking, and it's going to be hard analysis, but there's going to be a significant trucking component to organic diversion, in a lot of different, not only just getting the organic waste to whatever the management facilities are, but then there's byproducts of, for example, digestion will have a digestate, and that has to be taken care of, and that probably is going to be an additional trucking component. So there's more trucking, there could be more trucking associated with a lot of these scenarios that really needs to be looked at, and trucking equals emissions. So I think that would be something that you need to look at in your environmental assessment. And that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks for making the time to come out here, and also seeing the changes in this draft versus the original draft. My name is Nydia. I'm with Coalition for Clean Air, and I know that we've made comments. You've heard from some of my colleagues in the Fresno area. Specifically, I think related to what the gentleman was saying earlier, I'd like to urge that the ARB should adopt measures that reduce the SLCPs through direct regulations and complementary incentives, because it really shouldn't put LCPs into the cap and trade program, partly because these pollutants are specifically hazardous to local residents that are already burdened. One of the things is we see that these trades and credits could be offset elsewhere, and then the communities that are most impacted wouldn't see those benefits. On slide number 6, black carbon measures, I'd like to ask that further reductions of black carbon will rely in part on a timely and thorough implementation of the Sustainable Freight Action Plan. I'm sure you've thought about it. I just wanted to urge you to do more. I see two bullets, sub-bullets say state implementation plan and the scoping plan. And I'd also like to note that we work very closely with ARB on the Sustainable Freight Action Plan, and that's another opportunity for the expeditious changes in this, and it has to be done timely. Secondly, biogas captured as part of methane reduction efforts should be used primarily, we see, in heavy-duty trucks. Specifically, this would help displace the petroleum and diesel, and this would lead to further reductions in black carbon. That's all I have. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is John Yee. I am the Advocacy Director for the American Lung Association. And so allow me to begin by saying that we support your leadership on these issues, especially on we support the draft plan that the Resource Board released to meet the 2030 super pollutants targets. As you know, curbing the health impacts of climate change through this, that we also believe that it will also advance many of the health outcomes, cutting heart, lung, and cancer risk, improving local air quality, and reducing food insecurity and food waste. And so we just want to provide a few real brief comments. We echo a lot of comments that were made by some of our partners previous, specifically on the wood smoke issue. We want to thank you for including the new analysis of electric home heating in the report. We strongly encourage the board to prioritize incentive funding for wood smoke change-out programs to emphasize the cleanest home heating options and move toward the elimination of new residential wood smoke. We really strongly believe that incentive funds to reduce pollution should not be spent on more wood burning. We also encourage the board to continue its important work to finalize sustainable freight plan and oil gas regulations to reduce other key sources of black carbon emissions. We also encourage the board to move forward as quickly as possible to develop strategies to reduce methane from the dairy sector. In closing, we encourage you to stay focused on improving community health as a basis for this plan. We look forward to working with you as it's finalized and new health protective measures are developed and implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to reiterate that if there are any webcast participants, that you can submit your comments or questions to the email address given in the video currently, slcp@arb.ca.gov, and should any come in while we're holding this workshop, we will be addressing them in person here as well. Thank you.
Hello, Jennifer Morris from SoCalGas. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. We appreciate ARB's recognition of utilizing organic waste streams to reduce SLCPs, and we support the goals of SB 1383. When used as a transportation fuel for electric generation or displacing other traditional natural gas uses, pipeline-injected renewable gas provides a solution to address multiple emissions challenges and is also a flexible and reliable renewable energy source. On the on-road heavy-duty transportation sector, renewable gas provides the best opportunity for California to achieve its air quality and climate change goals. Nydia mentioned the sustainable freight strategy. We've also been working closely with staff on sustainable freight. Major reductions of toxic air contaminants can immediately be realized in disadvantaged communities adjacent to freeways and areas of high diesel engine activity where relief is most urgently needed. Renewable gas in older conventionally fueled diesel vehicles can also reduce black carbon emissions in those communities. Utilities can play a key role in investing in pipelines and other infrastructure needed to produce renewable gas and connect the projects to the pipeline system, and by developing vehicle refueling infrastructure. A renewable gas standard and the ability to recover costs and rates would drive this investment for production, processing, and pipeline interconnection. And I'd also like to echo the comments from the previous gentleman from the wastewater sector that we also support the 5% renewable gas standard mentioned in the scoping plan, but would also like it applied to all scenarios, especially the draft scoping plan scenario that includes cap and trade. I'd also like to add on to the comments from the gentleman from American Lung Association that mentioned wood smoke changeout. So in the SLCP economic analysis, we saw the comparison with switching out wood smoke to wood smoke and also electric heating options and natural gas. And again, we believe natural gas is a cost-effective option to reduce black carbon in this sector. SoCalGas plans to be part of the SB 1383 working groups, and we look forward to working with ARB and other stakeholders in the coming year to help ensure successful implementation and ultimately achieve California's GHG reduction goals. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Charlie Hahn. I'm representing True Manufacturing, a commercial refrigeration company that specializes in self-contained equipment serving the restaurant and commercial products like what you would see at checkout lanes, somewhere in hotel lobbies, lots of smaller, the self-contained equipment. We would like to thank the Commission for their work and definitely agree 100% with your direction, because there are alternatives out there for HFC reduction that are very, very active at this moment, and we truly do have the ability to reduce a great deal of the carbon banking that's out there, potential damage that's out there right now. Give you an idea that right now we're looking at alternate refrigerants instead of using HFCs, which have global warming potential of any place from 1430 to 3922. We can replace them with alternate refrigerants in the propane design, which has a GWP of 3.3 and uses 50% of the charge size or less. So there are alternates available in certain market sectors, and we highly encourage the Commission to go back and look at the dates to which were removed from the previous draft and put them back in, because the market can meet critical dates. Not all refrigeration markets have near the flexibility that we do, but in our sector, it is very doable. There are many manufacturers who are already producing hydrocarbon units, whether it be isobutane or propane. And give you an idea, we're the largest in the sector. We have 70% of our products already converted, and by the end of next year, we will have 100% of them converted. So we will be moving away from freezers which are using 404A with a GWP of 3922 to half the charge size with a GWP of 3.3. It is a huge impact in the market, and it brings with it great advantages because of reductions in electrical consumption of 20% or more. So we encourage the Commission to move forward. One of the things that was removed in the most recent pattern was the possibility of rebates for our end users for early adoption of alternate refrigerants. We stand no direct financial advantage from that, but of course there would be potential for great sales in that market. But the customers, the people in California who are buying the equipment, can certainly improve their own market possibilities. They can also improve their own conditions by going to new equipment that uses the alternate technologies. Do you have any questions?
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Hahn. The California Air Resources Board really appreciates the leadership of True Manufacturing in bringing these low global warming potential refrigerants into the self-contained equipment, of which True Manufacturing is one of the major manufacturers in the world, actually, on this. And we really appreciate all the time and the money, millions and millions and millions of dollars that True Manufacturing has spent to make this happen. And we know that other companies will probably follow your lead, and we're doing our best to incentivize the use of the alternative refrigerants that are less global warming before we make them mandatory if we decide to go down that route. You mentioned the lack of rebates. Unfortunately, we were going to fund quite a bit of money for these rebates. For many reasons, that money didn't materialize. What we're doing about that right now is we're working with the electric utilities to see if the businesses that are buying the new equipment can somehow get a rebate or an incentive by using less energy, because a lot of these alternative refrigerants, like you mentioned, the hydrocarbons are extremely energy efficient. And so you save a lot of money in the long run over the lifetime of this equipment. But we're working with the electrical utilities. We don't have any agreements at this time. We think mostly what the Air Board will do is we'll try to arrange agreements directly between the business and their local electric utility provider. And once again, the Air Board thanks True Manufacturing for their leadership on this, on the issue of reducing HFC emissions. Thank you.
Okay, lots of good comments. Thank you very much. Just a couple of comments that came out today that I thought maybe I'd just quickly touch on. We were urged to not include short-lived climate pollutants in the cap and trade program, and I just would like to assure the commenter that that's not really under consideration. The short-lived climate pollutants, by their very nature, are not well suited to the cap-and-trade program, which is why we've developed this extensive plan separate from the cap-and-trade program to address short-lived climate pollutants. And there was also a couple of comments about wood stove swaps, and we were urged to not fund wood-to-wood swaps. And you know, it's really our desire and our intention to fund swaps that truly reduce harmful emissions. So it makes a lot of sense to swap to natural gas and electricity, electrical heat, which is what we're going to try to do. It's going to take a lot of creative funding work to get that done. There are cases, though, where wood-to-wood is probably the best solution. There are some kind of remote and isolated communities, really where there is no natural gas, and electrical heat is very expensive, and wood heat is probably going to stick around for a little while. So in those situations, it makes a lot of sense to swap out older, dirtier stoves for the newest EPA-certified low-emission wood stoves. But aside from that, we agree that the best solution is cutting out combustion sources altogether in residential settings. So those are just a couple of items that I picked up on. So with that, maybe, did anyone else have any other thoughts that they'd like to share at this time?
Hi, this is Dave Winningham with Lennox International. First, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the Air Board. Lennox manufactures residential and commercial HVAC as well as refrigeration equipment. And Lennox and others within the HVAC and refrigeration industry really took a lead role to foster and support the Kigali Agreement. CARB has indicated that further assessment of the Kigali Agreement, including an external evaluation, is ongoing. We have a comment period ending towards the end of January, and Lennox is curious if the results of that internal or external analysis are going to be available prior to the end of the comment period.
Yes. The analysis that you refer to is we are looking at basically the impact of the global HFC phase down, the Kigali Amendment, and we're seeing how much of the HFC reductions that California requires to follow Senate Bill 1383 that we need in addition. I guess preliminary results are that the Kigali phase down is really, really good, but it will not get us all of the reductions required. The results of that will not be available by January 17th, the end of the comment period. However, they will be available before the board meeting. I can tell you that plus or minus, the Kigali Amendment will probably get California about 55% to 75% of our reductions required by 2030, which means that there is going to be a certain amount remaining. And in order to get the HFC reductions that we require, we will most likely go forward with the measures that we have suggested in the proposal. Obviously, the incentive measures, which we're really trying to make it work, are voluntary. That money will likely come from electric utilities. And then we would have possibly a sales restriction on refrigerant with a global warming potential greater than 2,500. The reason we would do that is because there are drop-in replacements available right now that have approximately the same cost. And of course, we're looking at prohibitions of high global warming potential refrigerant in new equipment. If a careful reading of the short-lived climate pollutant strategy, you'll notice that we removed the dates. Previously, the dates were to start those requirements in January 2020 for refrigeration and January 2021 for air conditioning. We're carefully assessing to see if we still need those start dates, which we realize might be a little aggressive for some types of equipment. Obviously not all, because As Mr. Hahn pointed out, their company is currently selling compliant equipment right now. We realize that air conditioning, you can't go out and buy a home system right now that would meet the requirements we're asking. We do realize that, which is why the Air Board is working very closely with the standards and codes organizations to try to update the standards and codes to actually catch up with the low GWP technology. So I guess the short answer is we really won't have the results of that analysis by the end of the comment period, but we really expect to have that before the March board meeting.
Okay, we appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments.
Right. This is a personal comment. It's nothing to do with my work. You know, I noticed you, and it's not the first time talked about stoves and trying to update technology on that. And it brings to the whole issue of residential burning in fireplaces and that type of thing. Being someone that lives downwind from a lot of people that likes to use their fireplace and also sometimes use their backyards for burning wood out in the open. Whenever you have a regulation that starts impacting down to the residential level, without a strong enforcement component, the regulation has no teeth at all. I could tell you from my personal experience, it's almost impossible to get someone to say, you need to stop doing what you're doing because it's a nuisance and in many cases against the law. So I just send that message to you as someone that has gone through this. Short of hiring lawyers, you can't get people, even calling the South Coast AKMD, you can't get them to do anything without moving boulders. So enforcement is critical to any of these measures that get down to the residential level. Without that enforcement, the regulations will have no teeth at all. So that's my personal comment for the day. Thanks.
I guess one response to that is that there's a suggestion, I believe it's in our plan, that building codes could be changed so that new construction does not include fireplaces. So that's something that we could maybe do because, you know, it is, as you say, it's very difficult to, if there is a fireplace in the home or a fire pit out behind the home, it's pretty difficult to convince people to not use those. So that's true, that is a problem. Okay, anybody else? Okay, well, thank you so much for showing up today. And if, you know, after you leave, you have more thoughts, you've got all our email addresses and our websites. We welcome and openly solicit your comments. That helps improve our product. So thank you very much for coming. And if you'd like to come chat afterwards, come on up, and we still have a little bit of time. So thanks again.